There's a particular kind of joy that some people experience when plans get canceled. That moment when a text arrives saying let's reschedule, and instead of disappointment, there's a wave of relief. If you've ever felt that, you're part of a fascinating psychological profile: people who genuinely love staying at home. For years, society has painted the ideal life as one filled with social gatherings, adventures, and constant outward activity. But there's an entire population who finds their deepest satisfaction, their most authentic selves, within the walls of their own space. And contrary to popular misconception, this isn't about fear, laziness, or social inadequacy. The psychology behind loving home is far more complex and, frankly, far more interesting. Today, we're going to explore the minds of homebodies. We'll look at the neuroscience, the personality factors, the evolutionary psychology, and the modern context that makes staying home not just acceptable but potentially optimal for certain individuals. Whether you're a homebody yourself, love someone who is, or simply can't understand why anyone would choose Netflix over nightlife, this exploration will give you a whole new perspective. Let's begin by understanding what we're actually talking about when we say someone loves staying at home. First, let's be clear about what we mean. Loving to stay home exists on a spectrum, and it's important to distinguish it from clinical conditions like agoraphobia or social anxiety disorder, though there can be overlap. A true homebody is someone who genuinely prefers home-based activities and finds them more restorative, enjoyable, and meaningful than most external social or recreational activities. They're not avoiding the world out of fear, they're choosing home because it's where they thrive. Psychologists sometimes use the term home-oriented, or refer to people with high place attachment. Research shows these individuals experience their home environment as an extension of their identity. It's not just a building. It's a carefully curated ecosystem that supports their psychological needs. There are different types of homebodies. Some are introverted homebodies who need home for energy restoration. Others are creative homebodies who view home as their workshop or studio. There are routine-oriented homebodies who love the predictability and control. And then there are sensory-sensitive homebodies who find the outside world simply too stimulating. What unites them all is something called psychological ownership of their space. Studies show that when people feel true ownership of an environment, not just legal ownership but psychological possession, they experience reduced cortisol levels, improved mood regulation, and enhanced cognitive functioning. Home becomes a source of competence and control in a world that often feels chaotic. Interestingly, the pandemic revealed that many people who thought they were extroverts discovered they actually enjoyed extended time at home. This suggests that our self-concepts don't always match our actual preferences, often because we've internalized social expectations about what we should enjoy. Now let's look at the brain science behind why some people's neural wiring makes home so appealing. When a homebody walks through their front door after being out, something fascinating happens in their brain. Neuroimaging studies show activation in the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the same region associated with reward processing and feelings of safety. Essentially, coming home triggers a neural reward response similar to what others might get from social interaction or novel experiences. Let's talk about dopamine, the neurotransmitter often called the motivation molecule. We usually hear about dopamine in the context of seeking novelty and reward. But here's what's less discussed. Dopamine pathways differ significantly between individuals. Some people have what researchers call high novelty-seeking temperaments. Their dopamine system rewards exploration and new experiences. Others have lower baseline novelty-seeking, and their dopamine system is more responsive to familiar, controllable environments. For homebodies, the dopamine hit comes not from the new restaurant downtown, but from finally organizing that bookshelf, mastering a new recipe in their own kitchen, or settling into a familiar evening routine. Their reward system is calibrated differently, not defectively, just differently. Then there's the amygdala, your brain's threat detection system. For some individuals, the amygdala is more reactive to unpredictable social situations, crowded spaces, or unfamiliar environments. This isn't necessarily anxiety in the clinical sense, it's just a lower threshold for threat perception. Home, being familiar and controllable, keeps the amygdala quiet, allowing the rest of the brain to function optimally. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive function and decision-making, also plays a role. Outside the home, we're constantly making micro-decisions: where to sit, how to respond, what social rules apply. This creates what psychologists call decision fatigue. Home eliminates most of these decisions. The cognitive load drops dramatically, freeing mental resources for deeper thinking, creativity, or simply rest. There's also fascinating research on the default mode network, the brain system active when we're at rest or engaged in internal reflection. This network is crucial for self-reflection, memory consolidation, and creativity. Studies suggest that people who prefer solitary activities have more active and efficient default mode networks. They're literally better at using their alone time productively because their brains are wired to make the most of internal processing. Neurotransmitter profiles matter too. Serotonin, which regulates mood and contentment, tends to be more stable in familiar environments. GABA, the calming neurotransmitter, is produced more effectively when the nervous system isn't in a constant state of social vigilance. For homebodies, staying home isn't about avoiding life, it's about creating the neurochemical conditions where they function best. What's important to understand is that none of this is pathological. It's variation, not disorder. Just as some people's taste buds prefer spicy food while others don't, some brains prefer the stimulation profile of home over the stimulation profile of social outings. Neither is better or worse, they're just different optimization strategies. Now let's explore how personality shapes home preference. The Big 5 personality traits give us a useful framework here. Introversion is the most obvious factor. Introverts, who make up about 30 to 50% of the population, process dopamine differently than extroverts. While extroverts need high levels of external stimulation to feel good, introverts are more sensitive to dopamine and can easily become overstimulated. For them, home provides the optimal stimulation level, what psychologists call their sweet spot of arousal. But introversion alone doesn't explain the homebody phenomenon. Plenty of introverts enjoy going out in controlled doses. What matters more is the combination of traits. High sensitivity, studied extensively by psychologist Elaine Aron, affects about 20% of people. Highly sensitive people process sensory information more deeply. They notice subtleties others miss. They're more affected by loud noises, bright lights, and emotional atmospheres. For them, most public spaces are genuinely exhausting on a neurological level. Home becomes not just preferred but necessary for regulation. Then there's conscientiousness, the trait associated with organization, planning, and routine. Highly conscientious people often love home because it's where they can maintain their systems and routines without interference. Their home is optimized for productivity and efficiency in a way the outside world can never be. Openness to experience presents an interesting paradox. You might think people high in openness would hate staying home craving novel experiences, but many homebodies are actually quite high in openness. They're just pursuing that openness through books, films, online learning, creative projects, and deep dives into subjects of interest. They're experiencing variety, just through intellectual and creative channels rather than physical ones. Low extroversion combined with high agreeableness creates another homebody profile. People who care deeply about others but find the performance aspects of social interaction draining. They're not antisocial, they just prefer meaningful one-on-one connections or small gatherings at home over large social events. Attachment theory also plays a role. People with secure attachment styles tend to view home as a secure base from which they can explore the world. But here's the key: some securely attached people discover their optimal exploration happens through internal pursuits rather than external adventures. Their security manifests as contentment with home rather than restlessness. Anxious or avoidant attachment can make home feel like either a safety trap or a necessary refuge. For anxiously attached individuals, home might represent escape from the stress of navigating relationships. For avoidantly attached people, home provides the independence and control they crave. However, it's crucial to note that not all homebodies have insecure attachment. Many simply have personality configurations that make home their natural habitat. There's also the concept of autotelic personality, someone who generates their own goals and finds internal motivation. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who researched flow states, found that autotelic individuals are less dependent on external rewards or social validation. They can create meaningful, engaging experiences anywhere, including alone at home. This isn't escapism, it's self-sufficiency. The reality is that loving home often reflects psychological strengths, self-awareness, the ability to self-regulate, comfort with solitude, and independence from social approval. These are assets, not deficits. Let's step back even further and look at this from an evolutionary lens. Why would some humans be wired to prefer staying in one safe place while others seek adventure and novelty? From an evolutionary psychology standpoint, human groups have always needed diversity of temperament to survive. The explorers and risk-takers discovered new resources and opportunities. But equally important were the keepers of the hearth, the individuals who maintained the home base, preserved knowledge, refined techniques, and provided stability. Anthropological evidence suggests that in hunter-gatherer societies, there was always a distribution of temperaments. Not everyone was a hunter. Some individuals were more suited to gathering, tool-making, child-rearing, food preservation, and other home camp activities. These roles were equally vital for group survival. There's something called the sitter-rover theory in evolutionary psychology. Some humans evolved to be rovers, seeking novelty and new mates, dispersing genes widely. Others evolved to be sitters, forming stable bonds, investing deeply in offspring and community, maintaining continuity. Neither strategy is superior, they're complementary approaches that strengthen the species as a whole. Neurogenetic studies have found that the DRD4 gene, which affects dopamine receptors, has variants associated with novelty-seeking behavior. Some populations have higher frequencies of the novelty-seeking variant, often populations with histories of migration. Others have more of the stability-seeking variant. This suggests that both temperaments have been selected for across human evolution. The concept of home itself is deeply wired into human psychology. Edward O. Wilson's biophilia hypothesis suggests we have an innate need for connection to our living environment. For some people, this manifests as love of nature and outdoor exploration. For others, it manifests as the creation of a perfect personal habitat, a home that meets all their biophilic needs through plants, natural light, comfortable microclimates, and personal touches. Territorial behavior is another evolutionary factor. Humans, like many animals, have instincts around territory. For some individuals, the drive to create, maintain, and enjoy their own territory is particularly strong. This isn't possessiveness in a negative sense, it's the deep satisfaction that comes from having a space that's truly yours. Throughout history, many of humanity's greatest achievements came from people who preferred solitude and routine. Think of scientists in their laboratories, writers in their studies, artists in their studios, monks in their cells. The ability to be content in one place, working deeply over long periods, has been essential to human cultural and intellectual development. In our modern era, we've perhaps overvalued the extroverted, adventurous ideal and undervalued the contemplative, home-based temperament. But both are ancient, valid, and necessary human strategies. The modern world has fundamentally changed what it means to stay home, and in many ways, it's made the homebody lifestyle more viable and fulfilling than ever before. 50 years ago, staying home meant genuine isolation from information, entertainment, and social connection. Today, you can access virtually anything from home, education through online courses, entertainment through streaming services, social connection through video calls, shopping through delivery services, even healthcare through telemedicine. This is what psychologists call environmental enrichment. Your home can now provide the variety and stimulation that previously required going out. A homebody today isn't cutting themselves off from the world, they're accessing the world on their own terms and timeline. The internet has been particularly transformative for homebodies. Online communities allow for social connection without the sensory and social demands of in-person interaction. You can engage when you have energy and withdraw when you don't. You can find people who share your specific interests regardless of geography. And you can communicate in writing, which many homebodies find more comfortable than face-to-face conversation. Remote work has legitimized staying home in a new way. Suddenly, productivity isn't tied to presence in an office. Many organizations discovered during the pandemic that some employees are actually more productive at home, particularly those who were struggling with open office environments, long commutes, and constant social demands. This doesn't mean staying home is always healthy. The modern context also brings risks: too much screen time, lack of physical movement, vitamin D deficiency from insufficient sunlight, and the echo chamber effect of algorithm-driven content. The key is intentionality. Healthy homebodies create routines that include physical activity, varied activities, some form of social connection, and exposure to natural light. Technology has also changed how we think about presence and absence. You can be deeply engaged with the world while physically at home. You can attend conferences virtually, collaborate with colleagues across continents, maintain friendships through regular video calls, and participate in global communities. Physical presence isn't the only valid form of engagement anymore. There's also been a cultural shift, slow but real, toward accepting diverse lifestyles. The JOMO movement, the joy of missing out, celebrates the choice to skip events and stay home. Hygge, the Danish concept of cozy contentment, has gone global. There's growing recognition that the hustle culture and forced extroversion aren't working for everyone. Social media paradoxically has both helped and hurt homebodies. On one hand, it can create FOMO and make people feel inadequate for not having an exciting out-and-about lifestyle. On the other hand, many homebodies have found their people online, communities that validate and celebrate the home-centered life. The modern homebody isn't a hermit. They're someone who's figured out how to craft a rich, full life that happens to be primarily home-based. They've rejected the one-size-fits-all approach to a good life and built something that actually works for their psychology. Let's talk about what homebodies gain from their lifestyle. Because there are genuine psychological advantages to being comfortable at home. First, there's autonomy and control. At home, you control the temperature, the lighting, the noise level, who you interact with, and when. This sense of control is crucial for mental health. Research consistently shows that perceived control reduces stress and improves well-being. For people who feel overwhelmed by the lack of control in other areas of life, home becomes an anchor of agency. Then there's cognitive restoration. Attention restoration theory suggests that our attention is a limited resource that needs recovery. Nature is one way to restore attention, but so is a familiar, comfortable environment with low demands. Home provides what researchers call effortless attention. You can function without constant vigilance or decision-making. This is genuinely restorative for the brain. Creativity flourishes in conditions of psychological safety and uninterrupted time. Many homebodies are highly creative precisely because they've created home environments optimized for creative work. They have their materials at hand. They can enter flow states without interruption, and they don't lose ideas to the disruption of travel and social obligation. There's also authenticity. At home, you don't have to perform any social role or manage others' perceptions. You can be completely yourself. For people who find social performance exhausting or inauthentic, this is deeply valuable. The psychological freedom to just be, without audience or judgment, is something many people rarely experience. Routine and ritual provide enormous psychological benefits: reduced anxiety, increased sense of control, enhanced ability to form habits, and the comfort of predictability. Homebodies can build robust routines that support their mental health and productivity. They can have morning rituals, creative routines, and evening wind-down practices that would be difficult to maintain with frequent disruptions. Deep work, the ability to focus intensely on cognitively demanding tasks, requires extended periods of uninterrupted time. Cal Newport's research shows that deep work is increasingly rare and increasingly valuable. Homebodies who protect their time and attention can achieve levels of depth and quality that people with fragmented schedules struggle to match. There's also the underrated benefit of self-knowledge. People who spend significant time alone tend to have better self-awareness. They notice their own patterns, preferences, and needs because they're not constantly responding to external demands. This self-knowledge supports better decision-making and life choices. Finally, there's the simple fact that for some people, home-based activities genuinely bring more joy than external ones. Not because they're afraid or limited, but because reading a book in your favorite chair, cooking a complex meal in your own kitchen, or working on a personal project in your space provides more satisfaction than most social events or outings. Respecting your own preferences, even when they differ from the norm, is psychologically healthy. Of course, we need to address the legitimate concerns about loving home too much. When does preference become a problem? The key distinguishing factor is whether your home preference is creating problems in your life. Are you missing important obligations? Are your relationships suffering? Is your physical health declining? Are you avoiding things you actually want to do? If so, you might be dealing with something beyond simple preference. Social isolation is a genuine concern. Humans are social creatures. Even introverts need some connection. The difference is that homebodies can meet their social needs in different ways: video calls with close friends, online communities, occasional quality interactions rather than frequent casual ones. If you're feeling lonely and disconnected, that's a sign to address your approach. Physical health is another concern. Homebodies need to be intentional about movement, sunlight exposure, and varied activities. Depression can masquerade as preference, making you want to stay home not because you enjoy it, but because you lack energy and motivation. If staying home feels like hiding rather than choosing, that's worth examining. The fear is that loving home might be avoidance, and sometimes it is. The question to ask yourself: am I choosing home because it makes me happy and supports my goals, or am I choosing home because I'm afraid of what's outside? The former is healthy preference, the latter might benefit from support. There's also the social pressure concern. Some homebodies struggle with guilt or feel they should be different. But living according to others' preferences rather than your own creates its own problems: resentment, exhaustion, and a sense of living inauthentically. As long as you're meeting your responsibilities and maintaining the relationships that matter to you, your lifestyle preferences are valid. The balance homebodies need to strike is between honoring their preferences and maintaining flexibility. Life sometimes requires us to do things outside our comfort zone. Healthy homebodies can do this when necessary, they just return to home as their base rather than forcing themselves into a lifestyle that drains them. It's also worth noting that preferences can change over time. Some people become more homebodied as they age and their priorities shift. Others find that life circumstances make going out more difficult or less appealing. There's no moral virtue in maintaining the same lifestyle forever. Adapting to your current needs and circumstances is wisdom, not weakness. The ultimate question is, does your preference for home support your overall well-being and life goals? If yes, then it's not a problem to solve, it's a preference to honor. So what have we learned about the psychology of people who love staying at home? We've seen that it's rooted in real neurological differences, in personality configurations that favor internal processing and controlled environments, in evolutionary strategies that have always been part of human diversity, and in the modern reality that home can be a rich, fulfilling base for a meaningful life. Homebodies aren't broken extroverts or people who haven't learned to live properly. They're individuals whose psychology is optimized for a different kind of life. They find their energy, creativity, and joy in ways that don't require constant external stimulation or social performance. Understanding this matters not just for homebodies themselves, but for everyone who interacts with them. If you love a homebody, know that their preference isn't a rejection of you or the world. It's an expression of how they best function. The best gift you can give them is respect for their needs and appreciation for the qualities that often come with the homebody: temperament, thoughtfulness, depth, loyalty, creativity, and the ability to be fully present when they do choose to engage. If you are a homebody, give yourself permission to build the life that actually works for you. You don't need to apologize for preferring Friday night at home to Friday night out. You don't need to force yourself to be someone you're not. Your preference for home, when it's genuine and healthy, is as valid as anyone else's preference for adventure and socializing. The goal isn't to make homebodies more extroverted, or to make extroverts appreciate home more. The goal is to recognize that human psychology comes in beautiful variation, and that different people thrive under different conditions. Some people bloom in the bustle of social life and novel experiences. Others bloom in the quiet, controlled richness of home. Both are living.
One of the most complex aspects of being a homebody is navigating relationships with people who have different social needs and preferences. This deserves its own exploration because relationship dynamics can either validate or undermine a homebody's well-being. Let's start with romantic relationships. When a homebody partners with someone who has similar preferences, things often flow smoothly. They can build a shared sanctuary together. Their evenings are mutually enjoyable, and there's no tension around social calendars. But what happens when a homebody falls in love with someone more extroverted or adventurous? Research on personality compatibility shows that opposites can indeed attract and create successful relationships, but it requires what psychologists call differentiation and integration. Differentiation means each partner maintains their authentic preferences and needs. Integration means finding ways to honor both people's needs within the relationship structure. For homebody extrovert couples, this might look like the extroverted partner going out with friends while the homebody enjoys solo time, finding social activities the homebody genuinely enjoys in small doses, creating a home environment that's welcoming so the extroverted partner can bring friends over sometimes, and both partners respecting that neither needs to change their fundamental nature. The problems arise when there's pressure to conform. An extroverted partner who constantly tries to drag their homebody out, making them feel guilty or inadequate, creates resentment and stress. Equally problematic is a homebody who expects their partner to stay home all the time, limiting their partner's natural social needs. The key is mutual respect and creative compromise. Friendships present their own challenges. Homebodies often have fewer but deeper friendships. They invest heavily in a small circle rather than maintaining large social networks. This is actually a strength. Research shows that quality of friendships matters far more than quantity for well-being and life satisfaction. But maintaining friendships as a homebody requires intentionality. You can't rely on spontaneous social encounters or regular group outings to keep friendships alive. Instead, successful homebodies often become excellent at one-on-one connections. They schedule regular video calls or phone conversations. they invite friends over to their space, and they show up for the important moments even when it requires effort. There's also the phenomenon of homebody guilt in friendships. You decline invitations, you're often the one suggesting staying in, and you worry your friends think you don't care or don't like them. The solution is communication. Good friends understand when you explain your needs. I love spending time with you, and I recharge better at home. Could we do dinner at my place instead? Is usually well received by people who genuinely care about you. Family relationships add another layer. If you come from a family that values constant togetherness or frequent visits, being a homebody can create conflict. Parents might interpret your preference as rejection. Siblings might not understand why you don't want to attend every family gathering. Setting boundaries with family is crucial but difficult. It helps to frame it not as rejection but as self-care. I love you and I need this time to function well. When we do spend time together, I want to be fully present, which means I need to protect my alone time. Most families, once they understand you're not going anywhere and that your preference isn't personal, can adapt. Then there's the question of children. Can homebodies be good parents? Absolutely. In fact, homebody parents often bring strengths. They're present and available, they create stable, nurturing home environments, they model that it's okay to have boundaries and honor your own needs, and they often encourage their children's independence and creativity. The challenge comes when your child has different social needs than you do. An extroverted child with an introverted homebody parent needs opportunities for socialization that might push the parent's comfort zone. Good homebody parents find creative solutions. Playdates at their house so they can supervise without leaving home, partnering with other parents to share driving duties, finding activities that match both parent and child's energy levels. What's crucial in all relationships is authenticity and communication. Pretending to be someone you're not creates resentment and exhaustion. But being rigid and unwilling to compromise creates isolation. The sweet spot is knowing your core needs, communicating them clearly, and finding creative ways to honor both your needs and your relationships. Since we're talking about people who spend significant time at home, let's discuss how to optimize that environment psychologically. Your home isn't just where you live, it's the primary tool for your well-being and productivity. Environmental psychology teaches us that spaces profoundly affect our mental states. The homebody who understands this has a massive advantage because they can intentionally design their environment for optimal functioning. Let's start with zones. Even in a small space, creating psychological zones for different activities is crucial. Your brain forms associations between spaces and activities. If you work, relax, eat, and sleep all in the same spot, your brain gets confused about what state it should be in. You need a work zone, even if it's just a specific corner with a lamp. You need a relaxation zone. You need a creative zone if that's important to you. These don't require separate rooms, just clear differentiation. Lighting is massively underrated. Natural light exposure, especially in the morning, regulates your circadian rhythm, improves mood, and enhances alertness. Homebodies need to be strategic about this. Position your primary daytime space near windows. Open curtains during the day. Consider a light therapy lamp for darker months. In the evening, dim, warm lighting signals your brain to wind down. The right lighting can be the difference between thriving at home and feeling perpetually groggy. Temperature and air quality matter more than most people realize. Studies show that cognitive performance drops in stuffy or overly warm environments. Homebodies should invest in air purification if they live in urban areas, maintain comfortable temperatures rather than suffering to save a few dollars on heating or cooling, and open windows regularly for fresh air circulation when weather permits. Sound environment is another crucial factor. Some people need silence, others function better with background noise. Figure out what works for you and create it intentionally. White noise machines, noise-canceling headphones, curated playlists, even the hum of a fan can all serve as tools. The key is control. You're creating an auditory environment that supports your mental state rather than fighting against environmental noise. Let's talk about what psychologists call restorative environments. These are spaces that reduce mental fatigue and restore cognitive capacity. Nature is the most researched restorative environment, but you can bring elements of nature indoors. Plants, which also improve air quality and humidity, natural materials like wood and stone, nature sounds or views of nature, and natural scents like lavender or eucalyptus. Personal meaning in your space is crucial. Research on place attachment shows that spaces filled with meaningful objects, photos, books, and personal touches provide greater psychological benefit than generic spaces. Your home should tell your story. It should reflect your interests, values, and identity. This isn't about Instagram aesthetics, it's about creating a space that feels authentically yours. Organization systems are particularly important for homebodies because chaos in your primary environment creates constant cognitive load. But here's the key. Your organization system needs to match your brain, not some ideal from a magazine. If you're a visual person, open shelving might work better than closed cabinets. If you're easily overstimulated, minimalism might be genuinely helpful. If you're creative and need inspiration, controlled clutter might actually be optimal. Movement and exercise options at home are non-negotiable for physical and mental health. You don't need a home gym, but you do need something. A yoga mat and YouTube videos, a set of resistance bands, a jump rope, even just space to dance or do bodyweight exercises. The barrier to movement needs to be as low as possible because motivation is finite. Social connection infrastructure is also important. Even homebodies need some social interaction. Make your home welcoming for the visitors you do want. Have comfortable seating for conversations. Keep some guest-friendly food and drinks on hand. Make it easy to have people over in low-pressure ways because sometimes the easiest socializing happens at home. Finally, sensory comfort is paramount. Homebodies often report being more sensitive to sensory input, so optimize for comfort. Soft textures in fabrics, comfortable furniture that actually supports your body, pleasant scents that you enjoy, your favorite foods and drinks readily available, and temperature control that keeps you comfortable. Your home is your primary tool for living well. Treat it as such. Invest in it, optimize it, make it truly yours. When your environment supports your psychology, everything else becomes easier. Let's look forward. Where is the homebody lifestyle heading, and what might the future hold for people who prefer home-centered living? The trend lines are fascinating. Remote work, accelerated by the pandemic, isn't going away. Many companies have discovered that productivity doesn't require physical presence. This is fundamentally restructuring how we think about work and home. For homebodies, this is perhaps the most significant cultural shift in generations. Work is coming home, and that's legitimizing the home-centered lifestyle in unprecedented ways. Virtual reality and augmented reality technologies are on the horizon. Imagine being able to visit museums, attend concerts, or travel to historical sites without leaving your home. Not through a screen, but through immersive VR that provides genuine experience. For homebodies, this could mean accessing experiences that currently require physical travel, all from the comfort of home. Critics say it's not the same as being there, and they're right. But for many homebodies, it might actually be better, all the experience with none of the travel stress, crowds, or sensory overload. The concept of third places, those social spaces that aren't home or work, is being reimagined. Coffee shops, libraries, community centers, these have traditionally been where people gather. But online third places are emerging. Discord servers, virtual co-working spaces, online hobby communities, gaming environments. These provide social connection and community without requiring physical presence. They're not replacements for in-person connection, but they're valuable supplements, especially for homebodies. Smart home technology is making homes more responsive and optimized. Lighting that adjusts throughout the day to support your circadian rhythm. Temperature control that anticipates your preferences. Sound systems that create optimal acoustic environments. These aren't luxuries, they're tools that allow homebodies to fine-tune their environment for optimal functioning. The subscription economy has made virtually everything accessible from home. Meal kits, groceries, medications, entertainment, education, even therapy and medical consultations. This trend will only accelerate. For homebodies, this means less forced outings for basic necessities and more intentional choices about when to leave home. There's also a growing recognition in psychology and psychiatry that not all avoidance is pathological. The field is slowly moving away from the assumption that everyone should want to be out in the world constantly. Teletherapy has shown that treatment can be effective remotely. Online support groups provide community without travel. The medical model is adapting to acknowledge that for some people, home-based living is a legitimate preference, not a symptom to treat. Urban planning is beginning to consider the needs of home-centered people. The 15-minute city concept, where everything you need is within a 15-minute walk, actually serves homebodies well. You can step out briefly for essentials without major disruption. Dense, walkable neighborhoods with local amenities reduce the friction of leaving home. Education is transforming too. Online learning, once considered inferior, has matured. Degrees, certificates, and skills can be acquired from home. For homebodies who love learning, this is revolutionary. You can pursue intellectual growth without the social and logistical demands of traditional education. There's a potential dark side to all this. It's possible to become too isolated, to lose touch with physical reality, to let your world shrink until it's unhealthily small. The future challenge for homebodies will be maintaining genuine connection and embodied experience even as technology makes it easier to never leave home. But there's also tremendous potential. We're moving toward a world where people have real choice about how they live. Where you can craft a life that matches your psychology rather than forcing yourself into standardized templates. Where being a homebody isn't seen as a deficit but as a legitimate lifestyle preference. The future of work, social connection, entertainment, education, and even healthcare is becoming more flexible and distributed. This doesn't mean everyone will or should become a homebody, but it does mean that those who are wired that way will have more options and less stigma than ever before. The future is being built by people working from home offices, creating from home studios, connecting through home-based technology, and living richly without constant outward movement. That future looks pretty good for the homebody. So here we are, at the end of our exploration into the psychology of people who love staying at home. We've journeyed through neuroscience and discovered that homebody brains aren't broken, they're just calibrated differently. We've explored personality and learned that loving home often reflects psychological strengths like self-awareness and self-sufficiency. We've looked at evolution and seen that home-oriented temperaments have always been part of human diversity and success. We've examined how the modern world has transformed what it means to stay home, making it more viable and fulfilling than ever. We've discussed the genuine psychological benefits of home-centered living, autonomy, creativity, restoration, and authenticity. We've addressed the legitimate concerns about isolation and health while showing that these can be managed with awareness and intention. We've explored how homebodies navigate relationships, how to optimize your home environment, and what the future might hold for home-centered living. But beyond all the science and theory, here's what really matters. You get to decide how to live your life. Society will always have opinions about the right way to exist. Right now, the dominant narrative says you should be adventurous, social, constantly experiencing new things, always saying yes, maximizing every moment. That narrative works beautifully for some people, but it's torture for others. If you're someone who comes alive in the quiet of your own space, who finds joy in routine and comfort, who creates meaning through internal rather than external experiences, who needs home as your foundation rather than just your pit stop, you're not broken. You're not less than. You're not missing out. You're living in alignment with your actual psychology rather than someone else's ideal. The homebodies throughout history, the scientists in their labs, the writers in their rooms, the artists in their studios, the thinkers in their studies, they weren't wasting their lives. They were using their lives in ways that matched who they were. Many of them created things that changed the world, not despite their home-centered lives but because of them. You don't owe the world an extroverted personality. You don't owe anyone an explanation for preferring your couch to their party. You don't need to apologize for being yourself. What you do need is self-awareness to know the difference between healthy preference and unhealthy avoidance. You need intentionality to ensure your home-centered life includes the elements you actually need: some movement, some light, some connection, some variety. You need the courage to set boundaries even when people don't understand. And you need compassion for yourself when you struggle against social expectations. For those who love homebodies, understand that this isn't personal. When they decline your invitation, they're not rejecting you. When they seem content staying in, they're not missing out. They're living according to their design. The best thing you can offer is respect for their needs and appreciation for the unique gifts that often come with the homebody temperament. The world needs all kinds of people. It needs the explorers and it needs the keepers of home. It needs the networkers and it needs the deep workers. It needs the ones who bring energy to every room and it needs the ones who create sanctuary. Diversity of temperament isn't a bug, it's a feature. So whether you're a homebody yourself, someone who loves one, or simply someone trying to understand, remember this: there are many ways to live a meaningful, connected, full life. Some of them happen primarily at home. And that's not just okay, it's beautiful. Thank you for spending this time with me, exploring the rich inner and outer world of people who love staying home.